My father died suddenly. A few weeks later, his old friend from the army came to our house, saying he wanted to help. A few months after that, my sister disappeared. Everyone thought it was just a tragedy. But when I started searching, that's when the real nightmare began. My name is Rachel, and last spring is something I can't recall without trembling. It began with a phone call no family ever wants to get. Police. Accident. Heart attack. Our dad didn't make it. He died behind the wheel, on his way to pick up my mom from the library. One moment he was alive, probably humming along to some old song on the radio, and the next gone. He was only 56. Healthy. Strong. He never complained, only went in for routine checkups. Suddenly it was just the three of us. My mom, me, and Claire, my older sister. From the first night without Dad, the house felt different. Silent. Clarity. The TV stayed off. The coffee pot was cold. And the air itself seemed heavy, drained of life. My mother retreated into herself. She went to bed early, but I could hear her awake for hours, sometimes crying quietly. Her hands trembled when she tried to cook. She stopped reading, stopped flipping through her magazines, even stopped answering the phone. It was like she was sealed behind glass, unreachable. Claire tried to keep us going. She organized the funeral, handled the bank calls, closed Dad's accounts. She moved like someone running on autopilot. But every night I saw her on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the darkness without moving. And me? I was 17. Old enough to pretend I was grown, but still just a kid hiding behind a fake "I'm fine" mask. I wore Dad's sweaters because they smelled like him. I filled the notebook he gave me with pointless scribbles. I rode his bike even though it hurt to see it standing alone in the garage. Every object became heavier, carrying meaning it never had before. Then, a week after the funeral, David appeared. Mom said he was Dad's old army buddy from Iraq. I barely remembered him. Maybe we met when I was 9. He looked older now, gray showing through his beard. He wore a dark jacket, jeans, sneakers. He brought flowers for Mom, hugged her, and looked at Claire and me with a quiet sincerity. "I know there's nothing I can do to fix this," he said, "but I'm here if you need anything." First, I thought he'd stay for a day or two. But he stayed. He took the guest room, cooked dinner, fixed a broken faucet, replaced a bathroom light. He was quiet, steady, carrying the look of a man burdened by his own past. And for that I was grateful. We all were. He had shown up just when life felt unbearable. But underneath that calm, a restlessness began to grow in me. I didn't have a name for it yet. It was the kind of unease that lurks in the shadows, waiting for the moment you stop paying attention. David didn't act like a guest. He moved around our house as if he had simply returned after a long absence. Every morning before anyone else was awake, he was already in the kitchen, making coffee and quietly preparing breakfast. At first it looked like a kind gesture. My mom even said, "He just wants to help, don't push him away." I didn't push him away. But I couldn't relax either. I wasn't used to a strange man in pajamas barefoot in our kitchen. I wasn't used to him being the first face I saw when I came home from school, greeting me like it was the most natural thing in the world. He always seemed to do the right thing. He cooked soup when Mom got sick. He suggested changing the front door lock, saying the old one was too easy to open. He even bought me new headphones just because he knew I had lost mine. When I asked how he knew, he shrugged. "Your mom told me." And Mom, she came alive around him. For the first time since Dad's death, she wore makeup, went to the hairdresser. She put music on while cooking. She laughed again. I even overheard her telling him, "I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you." Meanwhile, I sat in my room pretending everything was fine, drowning myself in homework, filling the last pages of my notebook with sketches. Things looked so right that I felt guilty for being suspicious. Maybe I just didn't know how to accept kindness. But Claire, she was different. From the moment David arrived, she seemed to vanish from our shared reality. She slept late, ate alone, answered in one-word replies. When David tried to talk to her, she only nodded or muttered, "I don't know." "It's grief," Mom said. "Everyone handles it differently." David didn't push. At least not openly. He claimed he respected Claire's space, that he understood her pain. But then one afternoon, when I was alone in my room, he appeared at the door and said softly, "Claire is strong. But she shouldn't have to go through this alone. Tell her she's important. That we're here for her. It sounded supportive, but something in his tone unsettled me. Too certain. As if he already knew us better than we knew ourselves. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening. At 2:47 a.m. I heard quiet footsteps in the kitchen. I crept out, but the room was empty. Only the window stood open, and the faint smell of coffee lingered in the air. I didn't tell Mom about the open window or the smell of coffee. By morning, everything looked so ordinary that I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. At school I couldn't focus. I blanked on simple questions and kept staring out the window, lost in thoughts I couldn't control. When I came home, David was in the garage. He was repainting Dad's old table. The one Claire and I used to cover with doodles when we were kids. I stopped and watched. His movements were precise, too practiced for someone who was supposedly just helping out. "I think it'll be better if it's white," he said without turning his head. I stayed silent. To me, that table wasn't just furniture. It held Dad's stains, his scratches, our childish scrawls of Emma and Loren. All of that was part of him. And David was burying it under a fresh coat of paint. "It'll look like new," he added. And in my head I thought, maybe that's his plan, to make everything new. That evening, for the first time since early May, Mom invited us to dinner together. David cooked shrimp pasta, set the table, dimmed the lights. He sat across from us, talking casually about projects and movies. Mom laughed. But her laughter sounded strange, too loud, too quick, like it didn't belong to her. Across the table I caught Claire's eye. She barely touched her food, pushing pasta around her plate until David looked at her. "You're so quiet tonight, Clary. Is everything okay?" She lifted her head. What I saw wasn't anger or fear, it was colder than that. She stared straight at him and said flatly, "You don't have to call me that." David's smile came slowly, the same calm grin he used whenever something was no big deal. "Okay," he said. "I'm sorry, Claire." Mom jumped in, changing the subject. But the silence Claire had left behind stayed. It clung to the walls, settled between us, and pressed down inside me. That night, lying in bed, I heard footsteps in the hall. Slow. Careful. They stopped right outside my door and stayed there. Silent. I held my breath, frozen, until the steps finally moved away and the guest room door clicked shut. The next morning, Mom said, "David bought us new locks for the windows. He says it's safer." And for the first time I asked myself, who exactly are we supposed to be safe from? In the past weeks I stopped sleeping normally. I could fall asleep, but I always woke up at the same time, 2:47 a.m., like an alarm clock. And always the same thing, footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Steady. They stopped right outside my door. No knock, no touch, just silence. And that silence froze me more than any sound could. One night I dared to peek through the thin crack under the door. A faint light glowed in the hallway. And there it was, a shadow. A person's shadow, standing directly in front of my room. For minutes. Then it moved away. In the morning the kitchen looked ordinary again. Mom was stirring her coffee. David peeled oranges. He asked how I'd slept, smiling as if nothing had happened. My throat was dry, but I forced myself to answer, "Fine." After breakfast, I noticed my toothbrush in a different glass. Not where I'd left it. Before I would have brushed it off as Mom tidying up. But not anymore. Now every small change felt deliberate. Not cleaning. Not coincidence. Interference. Control. That same day I found my phone fully charged, even though I hadn't plugged it in. 2 of my browser tabs were gone. Closed. I knew I hadn't touched them, they'd been open for weeks. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, but reality felt like it was slipping out of focus. And still at the center, a clear signal pulsed louder every day. Something was very, very wrong. That evening David made lasagna. Mom praised him, laughed at his stories. But she didn't look like herself. She leaned toward him, tilting her head as if afraid to miss a word. Her shoulders sagged, and she agreed with every suggestion he made. From the wine to the movie. Claire showed up only at the end. She grabbed a plate but didn't sit down. "I'll eat in my room," she said. "Why don't you sit with us for a few minutes?" David asked casually. Calm. But something in his tone snapped sharp. Claire met his eyes. Her voice cut like glass. "You're not my dad. Don't act like you are." "Claire, what's that tone?" Mom scolded. But Claire had already turned and walked upstairs. I expected David to flare up. Instead, he gave that short, controlled smile. "She's still hurting," he said softly. "She just needs time." Later, when I went to my room, Claire was already waiting for me. "Close the door," she whispered. Her face was pale, her voice flat. Not angry, not scared, just heavy, like she was speaking from deep inside herself. "Do you notice anything? With your phone, with your stuff? Like things are changing, but you can't prove it?" I nodded. For the first time, I admitted it out loud. Claire pulled a small tablet from her pocket. "I write everything here. Every day. What I see, what happens when no one is watching. It's my only proof. If something happens, look for it. But don't tell Mom. And don't trust anyone who comes too easily and leaves too much behind." "What do you mean?" I whispered. She didn't answer. She just looked at me for a long time, as if I'd only now opened my eyes. Then she left. We never spoke of it again. And from that night on, when I heard footsteps outside my door, I wasn't only afraid. I waited. Because I knew that if he could stand there today, tomorrow he might come inside. Saturday began quietly. Mom went to the store with David, saying they needed to fix something in the kitchen and pick up parts. I stayed home. Claire was in her room. I heard her footsteps downstairs once, the sound of water from the kitchen, then silence. By 11, she was back upstairs. I tried to write an essay for English, but Claire's words from the night before kept circling in my head. "Don't trust someone who leaves too much behind." What did that mean? Did he leave objects? Impressions? Control? After lunch, I glanced into her room. The door was ajar. Her backpack lay on the bed, headphones tucked under the pillow. The bed was made. But Claire was gone. I walked through the house, kitchen, bathroom, yard. The car was still in the driveway. Her everyday shoes were by the door. But she wasn't anywhere. When Mom and David came back an hour later, I asked immediately, "Have you seen Claire?" Mom shrugged too casually. She said something about going to a friend's house. Whose house? I didn't ask. She just wanted some fresh air. Her words sounded rehearsed, almost borrowed, as if she wasn't speaking for herself. I looked at David. He didn't answer right away, just stared at his phone. Finally, he said, calm as always, "Should we text her?" I already did. She's not answering. Her phone was off. No replies on Instagram, Messenger, TikTok. I texted her close friend Layla. The answer was blunt. Claire didn't say she was coming. Haven't seen her in a week. That was when real panic sank in. Not outwardly, but deep inside me, freezing everything. I went back to her room. Makeup untouched. Charger still there. Her nightgown draped over a chair. The tablet missing. And I remembered her words. If something happens, look for it. I tore the room apart, drawers, nightstands, even hidden corners. No tablet. Maybe she had taken it with her. Or maybe someone else had. I lay down in my room, staring at the ceiling, shadows from the trees crawling across it. And the question burned inside me. What do you do when the people who are supposed to protect you don't see that you're being robbed? That evening, David said smoothly, "If she doesn't show up by morning, we'll call the police." Mom nodded, pale, echoing his words like they were her own. I didn't believe either of them. They would wait. But I wouldn't. At 2 in the morning, I woke abruptly. This time it wasn't footsteps. It was silence. Heavy, unnatural. I stepped into the hall. The guest room door was open. David's bed empty. I froze. Walked past Claire's door. It too was open. But she was gone. And this time I knew she hadn't left on her own. I called the police at 6:08 a.m. The voice on the other end was calm, mechanical. They asked for a description, a photo, her last known location. "My sister Claire is missing," I said clearly. "Her phone is off. She didn't take any of her things. She never leaves without telling someone. This isn't like her." "Maybe she just needed a few days away," the operator suggested. "She left everything behind," I snapped. "This isn't normal." They promised to send an officer to record the information. When I went downstairs, David was already at the coffee maker. He looked up, calm as ever. "You haven't been sleeping?" I called the police, I said. He nodded a little too quickly. You did the right thing. This is a worrying situation. Mom was sitting on the couch, arms wrapped tightly around herself. She looked exhausted, but I couldn't tell if she was really worried, or just wearing the face a mother is supposed to wear when her daughter goes missing. The officer arrived an hour later. Young, sleepy-eyed, notepad in hand. Is she a minor? He asked immediately. 18, Mom answered quickly. Still living at home, but technically an adult. Then it's not a disappearance, he said flatly. It's an unjustified absence. I'd expected it. They always found ways to downplay things, runaways, fights, kids being kids. Anything but the truth. I left the room, went upstairs and opened my laptop. If the police weren't going to take this seriously, I had to. I combed through her accounts. Messages, photos, anything. Nothing recent. No activity in the last 24 hours. Not even a story. Then I remembered her tablet. She used to say, I write everything here. It wasn't in her room, but I knew her cloud password. She rarely changed it. I logged in. Most files were blank or old. But one stood out. A recent backup created last night. Most of it was locked, but one document opened. I'm afraid no one will believe me. But David, his attention has become disturbing. I tried to ignore it, but it won't stop. If anything happens to me, check my phone. All messages are saved. The words made my blood run cold. I took a screenshot, saved it to a flash drive and went back downstairs. I need to speak with the officer, I said firmly. David was sitting comfortably beside him, speaking with calm authority. He looked both relaxed and alert, the way someone looks when they've already rehearsed their part. I found a file Claire wrote before she disappeared, I said. She points directly to David. The officer raised his brows. He glanced at David. David smiled, almost pitying. It could be doctored. She was depressed. Grief does strange things. Kids sometimes invent someone to blame. Mom shifted on the couch, eyes down. She didn't defend me. Didn't even look at me. Instead, she looked at David, as if he was the only one keeping her from drowning. The officer sighed and took the flash drive. We'll check it. But so far, there's no reason to believe Mr. David has done anything wrong. I wanted to scream, to shake them all. How could they not see it? But then I caught Mom's eyes, hollow, fixed on him. She wouldn't say anything either. That was the moment I realized. I was alone in this. And if I didn't fight for Claire, no one else would. And that's why I won't stop. I sat in the library for almost 4 hours. I opened the same sites again and again, but none of it registered. I was too afraid to go home. Finally, I decided to check Claire's account. She'd never changed her password. It was the day Dad died plus the name of her favorite childhood character. I typed it in. It worked. Most of the files were old photos. Nothing helpful. Then I remembered her saying once, if it's serious, I save it as a draft. No one checks drafts. I opened her email. One draft. No subject. Dated the day before she vanished. This is the last thing I can do. He's watching me. He moves things in my room. He says Mom chose him, so I have to as well. If I disappear, he'll be right. I didn't run away. I was forced to. He did something to my phone. I can't send messages. But if you're reading this, it means I left a trace. By the end, my chest felt tight. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out my thoughts. Somehow, I still copied the file, saved it to a flash drive, and sent it to my backup email. I logged out, cleared the history, and did the only thing left. Reached out to a volunteer group I'd read about, one that investigated missing people. I messaged the admin, a woman named Sergeant Lawson. She replied almost immediately. Send everything. But be careful. If there's surveillance at home, don't use your Wi-Fi. I sent the file. Her next message came fast. This is serious. Keep the original and a copy with you. We can't act officially yet, but I'll open an internal case. I stared at the screen until my hands trembled. The house was too quiet when I got back. David was in the kitchen, slicing something with a knife. I stepped inside. You're late, he said without looking up. Everything okay? Just bad internet, I muttered. By the way, I saw your phone in the bathroom. Don't leave it there. It's not safe with water. I nodded, keeping my face blank, and went to my room. That's when I saw it. A drawing on my pillow. A child's sun, crooked rays, clouds above it. Claire used to draw suns like that when we were little. At the bottom, in shaky letters, I'm still here. For a moment, I didn't know if it was real, or just my mind breaking under the pressure. But it didn't matter. Because I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to stop. I held the drawing in my hands for 10 minutes before I could move. A crooked little sun, clouds above it, the words, I'm still here. It was too much. Too close. Too perfectly timed. I called Mom, my voice shaking. The drawing. On my pillow. Do you know anything about it? Her reply was quick, dismissive. I thought it was yours. Something old. I didn't leave anything. Her tone was flat, practiced. Almost like she was repeating someone else's explanation. But I knew the truth. Claire used to draw suns like this when we were 10, filling the pages of her secret book. And if this picture had come from there, then someone had found it. And someone wanted me to see it. That night I didn't sleep. I lay still listening. The hum of the refrigerator. The creak of the floorboards. Every small sound blending into one suffocating silence. Not proof, but the feeling that something was right there, watching. At dawn I went to Claire's room. The closets, drawers, boxes, all too neat, almost sterile. Like someone had cleaned it all. Or erased it. In the bottom drawer of her desk I found an old black notebook, scratched and worn. Inside, the same drawings, suns, houses, our names. Some pages torn out. And tucked between them a plain white envelope. On the back, in faint pencil, I won't keep quiet. My knees nearly gave out. But I forced myself to hold steady. I slipped the notebook into my backpack and locked my room. The next step was the guest room. I waited until no one was home and crept upstairs. David had always said, don't touch anything in there. I opened the drawer under the bed. Clothes folded too neatly. Tools. An old laptop that wasn't ours. And envelopes full of photos. I pulled one out and froze. Mom and Dad. And David. Only Dad's image had been cut out, erased. On the back, in careful handwriting. Now it's right. I rifled through more. Claire and me as children, Dad cut out. At the beach. His figure gone, while David remained in the frame. Photo after photo, preserved and rewritten. My hands shook as I shoved everything back into place, closed the drawer, and locked the door the way it had been. But I knew. He would know I'd been there. I ran back to my room, shoved the notebook deep into my backpack, and scribbled down every detail before it slipped from memory. For the first time in my life I said it out loud. He's been planning this for years. We just didn't see it. And if I don't make it in time, she'll never say I'm still here again. I woke up with my fists clenched so tightly that my nails had left red marks across my palms. But the fear was gone. What replaced it was colder determination. If I didn't save Claire, no one else would. Sergeant Lawson hadn't responded in 3 days. The last message she'd sent was short. I'm watching. There's a leak. Stay safe. Then silence. I went to school, hoping for at least an hour of escape, but the principal stopped me at the entrance. She was holding my school tablet. We've received an anonymous complaint, she said. A file with inappropriate content was found in your memory. She turned the screen toward me. My chest tightened. It was my screenshot, Claire's words about David. Same file name. Same everything. Only I had never put it there. I froze. He could have done it, I whispered. Who? David. He knows my passwords. He could have planted it. She gave me a doubtful look, said the IT team would check, and told me to take a break. I left and walked home, my heart pounding. The lights were on. David wasn't there. Mom was in the kitchen, clutching a cup of tea like it was keeping her alive. She looked worn out. An old router sat beneath the table, wires pulled taut. David said the internet wasn't safe, she murmured suddenly, without me asking. He said we should be careful who connects. Her words sounded rehearsed. His words through her mouth. Something clicked. I rushed upstairs, opened my laptop and checked the home network. 2 unknown devices had been connected recently. One was labeled simply as a camera. My stomach dropped. Dad had taken down all the old cameras years ago, saying we didn't need them anymore. But one in the basement had stayed. Just in case, he'd said. I thought it had been thrown out long ago. I traced the signal and opened the feed. Black and white footage filled the screen. Me sitting in the kitchen a week ago. Claire walking through the hall. Mom on the phone. Every conversation, every look recorded. Someone hadn't just been watching us. They'd been cataloging us. I cut the power, went to the basement, and pulled the camera out from behind a toolbox. The little red light was still blinking, still working. And then I remembered David's casual words weeks earlier about an old van at an abandoned construction site. Better than a storage room, he'd said, with that strange look in his eyes. At the time I dismissed it. Now I couldn't. The next morning I dressed in sportswear, slipped my phone into my pocket, clipped a tracker to my belt, grabbed water and headphones. To anyone watching, I was just a girl out for a jog. The construction site lay on the southern edge of the city. Half-built walls and rusting beams from a mall project abandoned years ago. That's where I saw it. A van. White, weathered, hidden under branches. Tucked in so deep it was almost invisible. I approached, heart hammering. Listen. Silence. I knocked. For a moment, nothing. Then a voice. A woman's. Hoarse. Weak. Is that you? I pressed the tracker's button with shaking fingers. Then opened the door. And there she was. Claire. Alive. Thin, pale, drenched in sweat, but with the same stubborn fire in her eyes. She fell into my arms, her hug frail but desperate. He sleeps here, she whispered. But he's not here now. I didn't know when I'd get a chance. I pulled her out through a side gap, half dragging her across the concrete. We ran without looking back, straight to the garage of my father's old friend nearby. By the time David returned, we were already gone. Claire and I sat in the garage, wrapped in an old blanket Mr. Whitaker, our neighbor and Dad's old friend, had given us. He set 2 cups of tea in front of us, then quietly closed the door. I won't ask, he said. But tell me, should we call anyone? The police, I answered. But not just anyone. There's one person, Sergeant Lawson. She's the only one who listened. I texted her from an anonymous number. The message stayed unread. But a few minutes later another account replied, I'm safe. You are too. I've passed the case to internal affairs. Don't go home. For the first time in weeks I cried. Out of relief. And anger. David was still out there. He could come back at any moment. But now at least we knew who he really was. And that gave us something to fight with. Claire couldn't rest. She woke up at every creak of the garage. When I touched her shoulder, her whole body jerked. She wouldn't eat, only drank water. At one point she whispered, he said he saved us. That without him we'd be dead. That Dad didn't deserve us. Her words came out hollow like echoes of his voice. I didn't know how to answer. I just held her hand. The next day we went to the police station where Lawson worked. Another woman, a lieutenant from homicide, greeted us. She already knew who we were. We received everything from Sergeant Lawson, she said. She suspected David for a long time, but she needed proof. Now she has it. We handed over all we had, notes, screenshots, photos, GPS data, even the basement footage. She asked for copies of everything. But don't speak about this to anyone yet, she warned. We don't want him to realize he's been exposed. It's a matter of hours. When I asked if they were going to arrest him, she shook her head. We want to know more. We want to see what else he's done. There were whispers of 2 other unsolved cases with his name hidden in the margins. Files gone cold. Detectives reassigned. His trail erased from databases. But he had always been nearby. Watching. Claire and I returned to Whitaker House. I helped her take a shower, gave her clean clothes. She begged me not to leave her alone, not even for a minute. That evening Mom called. Her voice was trembling, wet with tears. They arrested him, she said. The police came to the house. He didn't resist. He was just packing. And Rachel, he was smiling. When they took him away, he was smiling. And he looked at me like I had betrayed him. Her words cracked something inside me. She was still half in his grip. You didn't betray him, Mom, I whispered. You just finally saw him. There was a long silence. Then she said something I hadn't expected. I'm going to therapy. I have to. For the first time in a long time, I believed her. The next morning came the official confirmation. David was in custody, charged with kidnapping, invasion of privacy, document forgery, possession of illegal materials. And a new suspicion was added: psychological manipulation of minors to build dependence. He said nothing in interrogation, just repeated one phrase over and over: "They'll understand who they've lost." But he was wrong. We hadn't lost. We had found each other, ourselves. 2 days after David's arrest, Claire and I suddenly became the faces of the story, without ever agreeing to it. The first article appeared in the local paper. The headline screamed, "Family Hero or Manipulator? The Story of David G." They'd pulled a photo from our social media, cropped and twisted out of context. The comments poured in. "That's not like him. I knew him, he was a great guy. The girls are making this up for attention." I stopped reading. But Claire didn't. She scrolled in silence, then closed her phone and pressed her lips tight. No tears. Just that quiet, stubborn wall she built when words weren't enough. The next morning a TV show called, offering us a chance to tell our side. They dangled promises: support, a psychologist, protection. Both Claire and I refused. But it didn't matter. The story had already spun out of our control. At school, stares followed me everywhere. Some were sympathetic, others sharp with judgment. A boy I'd never spoken to sent me a message: "I feel sorry for your mother. She trusted him." Another girl commented under one of my photos, "Drama queen." I didn't respond, but with each passing day, the silence around me felt heavier than words. The police kept working quietly. Mom and I were called to interrogations. She answered questions softly, carefully. And sometimes I could hear it, her voice carried his phrases. He was trying to help us through grief. Maybe Claire misunderstood. Each time her eyes dropped to the table, ashamed, like she knew she wasn't speaking for herself. Lawyers warned us the case would be heard in open court. The charges were too serious, the public outcry too loud. And with it came the swarm, journalists at our door, anonymous messages, threats. "You ruined his life. Your father would be ashamed. You're no better than him." I wanted to scream back, but there was no point. The world had made up its mind. We were either liars or victims to be pitted. Then Sergeant Lawson reappeared. This time officially. She sat with us in the living room, her uniform crisp, her face steady. She spoke to Mom, to me, to Claire. "You shouldn't have had to live through this," she said. "But you stood your ground. That's rare." I asked her, "What about him?" She was quiet for a long time, then said, "He's a product of the system. But he's also a predator. He had opportunities, connections. He fed on trauma, grief, weakness. It's classic. But he was wrong about you. You're not his story." Her words broke something inside me, but in a good way. For the first time I felt my lungs expand fully, as if I hadn't been breathing for months. That night, Claire and I sat in the kitchen, mugs of cocoa warming our hands. She said softly, "I was afraid I'd never see you again. That things would go back to the way they were. That Mom wouldn't believe me. That no one would." I was scared too, I admitted. But eventually, the fear lost its power. "When?" she asked. "When I realized what he wanted most was silence. And we're not the ones who keep quiet." Claire smiled. A real smile. The first in a long time. "We never kept quiet, did we?" "Never." The courtroom smelled of dust and fatigue. People whispered, journalists prepared their cameras, lawyers reviewed papers. I sat next to my mother, and a little ahead of us was Claire. She didn't want to testify, but she had no choice. And then they brought him in. David. Calm, too calm. His hair was slicked back, his shirt was ironed, and he had a slight smile on his lips. But his eyes were empty. He looked at me, at my mother, at Claire. And for the first time he looked away. The judge, a woman in her 60s, began to read the charges in a sharp voice. Kidnapping, psychological pressure, surveillance, forgery of documents, manipulation of minors. Each word fell like a heavy stone. His lawyer stood up. "These accusations are exaggerated. The girls have suffered the loss of their father, and are looking for someone to blame. My client was a friend of the family. He helped them when they were broken with grief." Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the mother. She took a sharp breath, her lips barely parted, as if she were about to repeat his words. He helped. But instead, she clasped her hands on her knees and remained silent. Claire was the first to testify. She walked to the stand as if each step weighed a ton. Her voice trembled, but she looked straight at the judge. He controlled me. He said I should be grateful. That without him we were worthless. When I tried to run away, he locked the door. The lawyer jumped in with a question. What about the evidence? Why didn't you leave right away? Claire clenched her jaw but replied, because I knew they wouldn't believe me. And I was right. Many still don't believe me. Then it was my turn. I told everything about the tablet and the files, about the cameras, about the van. The judge listened silently. David sat with the same cold smile, as if he knew everything in advance. I finished with the words. I thought evil lived somewhere far away, but it was sitting at our table. And then he stopped smiling. When everyone was waiting for the conclusion, the lawyer announced an unexpected witness. A tall woman in a dark suit entered the courtroom. This is Ms. Julia Ortega, said the lawyer, the former director of the center where my client underwent rehabilitation. She will confirm that he was stable and under supervision. David's eyes lit up. He was sure he would be acquitted. But the woman spoke. I haven't worked there for several years. And I'm not here to defend him. I quit after I found his notes. There were photos of children, families, drawings. And the words. They don't know it yet, but they are mine. The courtroom fell silent. The judge lowered her eyes to her papers. Claire shuddered, and my mother finally raised her head. This time she wasn't looking at him. She was looking at us. Her hand gently covered mine. At that moment I realized that he wasn't just losing the case. He was losing the story he was trying to impose on us. The verdict was to be announced at 9 in the morning. My mother and I arrived early, not out of punctuality, but to gather our strength. The hall was quieter than before. There were fewer cameras. For journalists, the story had already lost its buzz. But for us, it was only coming to an end. David was sitting behind glass. He wasn't wearing handcuffs, just a plain gray shirt. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, scratches on his hands. But his gaze remained cold and empty. The judge entered and opened a folder. Her voice was steady, emotionless. Based on the evidence gathered, the testimony, and the conclusions of an independent psychiatric examination, the court has determined that the defendant committed the acts described. I squeezed Claire's hand. It was ice cold. However, the judge continued, according to the experts' conclusions, he was in a state of mental disorder that significantly impaired his ability to understand and control his actions. The court finds the defendant not guilty by reason of insanity. The room filled with whispers. I held my breath and Claire just clenched her teeth. He will be sent to a closed psychiatric institution under constant supervision. The length of his stay is indefinite. His condition will be reviewed every 6 months. I looked at him, and for the first time I saw not only evil but also brokenness. But that didn't make it any easier. We lived with all the consequences of his actions, regardless of whether he understood them. The judge closed the file and said directly to us, "He has lost his freedom, and you must regain yours." We left the courtroom in silence. The air outside felt heavy, as if a storm were coming. But the sun was shining. "This isn't a real punishment," Claire whispered. "Not what we expected," I replied. "But it's the end. At least in part." That evening we returned home. New locks, David's burned belongings, broken cameras. Mom stood at the stove and cooked dinner. Her voice was confident. "Now this house is ours again." The night after the verdict was unusually quiet. Not depressing, just real. We sat in the kitchen, Mom, Claire, and me. The tea had gone cold, the lamps were dim, even the clock seemed to have stopped. Mom was silent for a long time, then whispered, "I want to say something. And please don't interrupt." We waited. "I let him into our home. I let him take your father's place. And yours, Claire. I wanted someone to fix everything, but he only took away. I saw you drifting away, but I consoled myself with the thought that it was grief. You screamed with silence and I didn't hear you. I'm sorry." Claire's hands trembled, but she listened silently, tears streaming down her face. Mom turned to me. And you fought. For all of us. And I was blind. I trusted a stranger more than my own daughters. I will never forgive myself for that. But now I want to learn to see, to listen, to believe. From now on, I will always be on your side. We were silent. Then Claire got up and hugged my mother. I joined them. We held each other like a fragile but living tower. For the first time, we were truly a family. The next day, I received a letter. An invitation from an organization to a roundtable discussion for victims of digital violence. No cameras, just conversation. I stared at the screen for a long time. Claire asked, "Do you want to go?" "I'm afraid," I admitted. She replied quietly, "Fear shouldn't decide for us. If you say it, someone else will understand that they are not to blame." That evening, I opened my laptop and wrote, "My name is Rachel. I know that silence can scream, and I've learned to hear it." I pressed send, and I remembered. My father on the porch, the old radio, his laughter as Claire and I rode our bikes, and my mother watching from the doorway. That image remained. It was always with us, and David could never erase it. That night, I fell asleep peacefully. The silence in our home belonged to us again. A year later, I was speaking at a university. It was a small audience, 40 students, and the topic was digital violence, the invisible threat. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, but I began. "My name is Rachel. I am not a lawyer or a psychologist, but I know what it's like when a camera becomes a weapon, when silence turns into a trap." For half an hour, I shared our experience, read excerpts from Claire's diary, and told how we survived. After my speech, several girls came up to me and whispered, "Now I know it's not my fault." And that was the main thing. Meanwhile, Claire started an art group for teenagers who had gone through similar experiences. They drew their fears and victories, and she came back to life. Mom signed up for self-defense classes. She laughed that her fist was useless, but she kept saying, "I don't want to feel weak anymore. Not even in my thoughts." She started reading books in the evenings again like she used to. This little ritual seemed like a miracle. And I am no longer afraid of silence, because now I know that if it comes back, I will be the first to hear it. Fear never completely disappears, but it no longer controls us, because the strongest weapon against evil is not force. It is a witness.